OJ started that fateful drive. His four-way hazard lights were blinking, and no one knew what the Jews was thinking.
I've been to Reno, Chicago, Fargo, Minnesota, Buffalo, Toronto, Winslow, Sarasota, Wichita, Tulsa, Ottawa, Oklahoma, Tampa, Panama, Mattawa, La Paloma, Bangor, Baltimore, Salvador, Amarillo, Tocopilla, Barranquilla, and Padilla. I'm a kill. I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Crossed the desert bare, man. I breathe the mountain air, man. I've traveled, I've had my share, man. I've been everywhere.
This is Oversight Live, your advocate for good governance. We're putting the site back in. Oversight. Here's the watcher on the wall, your host, Ben Carpenter.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us this evening. It's good to see you. Good to be seen. And, man, there's a lot going on in the legislature. I can't help but focus on this issue of pensions. There is a major play at place to get a new defined benefits pension through the legislature, and I'm sure that it's going to end up on the governor's desk. And I just wanted to share a couple things with you, some articles this evening. Instead of going to the legislature, I wanted to show some things that you need to read and be aware of on the Anchorage Daily News editorials. It's important. I know there's a paywall there. You got to figure it out. Anyway, I just wanted to share these, and then I've got some comments that I got to make on this evening. First up, there's a editorial that I'm going to share here. This is by the Anchorage Daily News editorial board, and it's entitled "A Pension Promise We Can't Afford." And so I would urge you to go and read this article to get a perspective of some folks at the editorial board of the Anchorage Daily News. There is another article that is also good to read. This is an opinion found in the opinion piece by Representative Dan Sadler. The title of this article is "A Practical Path to Teacher Retirement Security." And he highlights what his opinion, and I happen to share this opinion of him, that we should be improving the defined contribution system that we currently have now, which is similar to your 401k, by allowing teachers to participate in the supplemental benefits system, right? That is something that they don't get to participate in, and they don't participate in Social Security. And so his summation of this article is, hey, look, let's fix what's broken and not move to a defined benefits plan. Move back to one, because we already have one, and we've got billions of dollars of unfunded liabilities that we're waiting to pay down here. Okay, final article that I want to show is from the HB 78 bill that is going to be exiting the legislature soon if the Senate votes on it, and if the legislature, the House, concurs with the Senate, and then it'll end up on the governor's desk. This is the bill sponsor, Representative Chuck Kopp, his opinion piece, which is a rebuttal to Representative Dan Sadler's piece, and probably the editorial board's piece as well. But in the timing piece of this is 6 hours ago that this was published. And He goes through what his argument is for why we need to have a defined benefits plan, and I'm not here to promote his argument here, but I'm wanting you to highlight that this is where you can hear his argument, where you can see it, and I'm going to present a counter to it. I think that it's necessary for me to provide a counterpoint. I don't hear my perspective being spoken out there, and so I think that we just need to slow down and have a honest conversation about this defined benefit system. And one of the things that the sponsor and other proponents say is that this defined benefit system is going to fix recruiting and retention in state government. You got to have this defined benefits pension system to fix recruiting and retention. The argument is that we need to restore stability. That if we promise a lifetime benefit again, people will stay. Vacancies will drop, overtime will fall, the system will stabilize. And that sounds reassuring. It sounds responsible. It sounds like we're rebuilding something that once worked. But here's the question we need to ask. Are we solving the real problem, or are we creating a new long-term financial risk while leaving the real drivers of workforce instability untouched? This debate's not about whether we want stability. We all want stability. This debate's about structure, and structure matters. Here's the central point I want you to keep in mind the entire time we're talking tonight. A defined benefit pension system requires political will to maintain funding discipline, during economic stress. And that's cyclical. A defined contribution system, which is also the retirement system we have now currently for new employees, does not create those stress cycles at the state level. And that's the core difference. Everything else flows from that. A defined benefit plan promises an outcome. It promises a formula-based check for life, a retirement check for life. To fund that promise, the state must make long-term assumptions about investment returns, about inflation, about how long people live, about how payroll will grow, about when employees will retire. These assumptions produce a number every year that represents what the actuary says the state should contribute in order to stay on track. If the state pays less than that, the difference becomes unfunded liability. And that unfunded liability accrues interest. Now compare that to a defined contribution system. In that system, the state promises a contribution, not an outcome. The state pays its percentage into an individual account. This is what you're familiar with your 401k and your employer retirement system. The employee owns the account. You can take it with you. If markets go up, the account grows. If markets go down, the account falls. The key distinction in this, under defined contribution system, market volatility affects individual accounts. Under the defined benefit system, market volatility becomes a public liability. And that's not rhetoric, it's mathematics. You'll hear that the HB 78 proposal is risk managed, that it has guardrails, that it self-corrects. You'll hear that it will not require a bailout, that not $1 will be added to the state's unfunded liability. Those are really, really strong claims. Let's examine them carefully, okay? When someone says this plan will not add $1 to unfunded liability, what they're really saying is this. Under the assumed rate of return, under the assumed payroll growth, under the assumed retirement patterns, under the assumed inflation, under the assumed life expectancy, under the assumption that required contributions are consistently made, the projection does not show additional unfunded liability. That's a projection. It's not a guarantee. It is conditional. It assumes that the model behaves as expected for decades. And here's the central point again. This is the point that where everything relies upon. The defined benefit system requires those assumptions to hold and require political discipline in the legislature and in our government bureaucracies when they do not. The ARM board is central to this. The actions of the ARM board, the retirement board, and the legislature are central to this. So what are real world conditions that aren't extreme? They're just economic variability. First, investment returns. Okay? What happens if returns average 5.5% instead of 7% for years? It's not a collapse, but that is within historical experience. If returns fall short of assumptions, the pension system generates losses relative to what the model expected. Required contributions rise. If employer contribution caps prevent full funding of the recommended amount, or if the budget are tight, budgets both, local and state budgets are tight, and contributions are suppressed, the difference becomes an unfunded liability. So what happened in state history? Well, we had problems with local municipalities being able to afford the defined benefits payments within their budgets, and the state had to act. Hopefully that never happens again, but who knows what the future holds with regard to the economy and investment earnings and all of the variables that need to be in place. When we're wrong, it becomes an unfunded liability. And it's not just like it's an unfunded liability dollar for dollar, it accrues interest. So when someone says not $1, what they mean is not $1 if investment earnings behave exactly as assumed. That's not a structural safeguard. That's confidence in a forecast. They want you to be confident in that forecast. Okay, second, revenue volatility. Alaska does not have a stable revenue source. Oil prices fluctuate, permanent fund earnings fluctuate, national recessions occur, federal policy changes. I mean, you just look at the federal debt load. Eventually, federal spending is going to have to come down. And when it does, there's going to be an impact on our state budget. During revenue downturns, pressure builds to smooth or reduce employer contributions, like we already had to do at the local level. The bill itself allows appropriations to offset employer rates. If a defined benefit system depends on steady full funding through downturns, then funding discipline must be strongest precisely when budgets are tightest. History shows that discipline is hardest during our fiscal stress. And again, this is the central point. Defined benefit systems convert economic volatility into political funding decisions. Defined contribution systems do not. What we currently have for new employees does not. Okay, what about payroll growth? Defined benefit system rely on contributions calculated as a percentage of payroll. That method assumes payroll growth over time. What happens if payroll stagnates? What happens if population declines in the state of Alaska? What happens if departments shrink or hiring slows? You've got a percentage of the population that wants to see a reduction in spending at the state level. What happens if we get a hold of our budget and we reduce spending? We reduce the workforce to a more sustainable level. Well, if payroll shrinks, the same percentage produces fewer dollars. Payments that were expected to reduce the unfunded balance may not do so as projected. You can be making payments and still not meaningfully reduce the principal. That shifts costs forward to future generations. Again, someone has to decide what to do about that. That's where the politics enters into this. Defined contribution systems do not have amortization schedules that unravel when your payroll shrinks. There's no long-term funding obligation dependent on payroll growth with a defined contribution system. Okay, what about life expectancy? If retirees live longer than projected, and over time they usually do, liabilities increase. Small changes in life expectancy assumptions can have large financial impacts. Under a defined benefit system that becomes a public funding issue, that's what you would expect. Like, you can bake that in, that's going to happen. Under a defined contribution system, it affects the individual account holder, not a state's long-term liability. Okay, no bailout. That's the claim that the bill sponsor makes. No bailout. There's not going to be a bailout. So what's a bailout? A bailout occurs when a pension system cannot meet its obligations without additional public money beyond what was normally planned in the system. Okay? Alaska's already had to bail out our pension system once. $3 billion. So you ask yourself the question, under what conditions would additional public funding be required? If investment returns underperform. If employer contribution caps prevent full funding. If the system works like it's supposed to, the caps work, you may need a bailout. If legislatures suppress contributions during the downturns, meaning if municipalities have problems meeting their budgetary obligations and the legislature acts, you may need a bailout. If payroll growth is weaker than assumed, you may need a bailout. If retirees live longer than projected, and these aren't extreme things. These are things that they're recurring realities in our economy. So when someone says no bailout, the honest translation is this: no bailout will be required if assumptions that we're making today hold, and if full recommended contributions are consistently made over decades. That's not the same thing as saying it cannot happen. There's a difference between a forecast and a guarantee. And that difference matters when you're talking about decades of public obligation. Now, let's pivot for a second. Recruiting and retention. The claim that a defined benefit pension is necessary to fix recruiting and retention is central to this theme. I've heard it for years. But what are the actual drivers of workforce instability? Well, in the legislature, we've heard about salary lag in certain job classifications. We've heard about wage compression. We've heard about slow hiring timelines. We have heard about vacancy-driven burnout. We've heard about housing shortages. We've heard about cost of living pressures. The retirement plan does not fix a 12-week hiring delay. It does not fix 15% pay gap. It does not build a house. It does not eliminate forced overtime caused by chronic vacancies. If a public safety candidate can make more money elsewhere faster with a quicker hiring timeline, a pension decades from now is not the deciding factor. If a nurse cannot find housing in a community, retirement structure is irrelevant. So we've got to ask, are we fixing the job or are we just expanding the promise? Because expanding the promise does not automatically fix pay competitiveness, hiring friction, workload imbalance, or management bottlenecks. And if those structural issues remain, a defined benefit system may improve mid-career retention at the margins, but it does not address the primary drivers of early turnover. Meanwhile, it introduces long-term fiscal exposure that depends on political discipline through the stress of economic cycles. So let's return to the central point one more time. Defined benefit pension systems require political will to maintain funding discipline during economic stress. Do you trust your legislature to do that? Defined contribution systems, the system that we have now, as it's set up, does not create those stress cycles in our state budget. The alternative is not doing nothing. The alternative is targeted reform. Make the defined contribution system more competitive. Adjust employer contributions strategically. Offer retention incentives at key service milestones. Fix your hiring timelines. Modernize your pay classification systems. Address housing barriers. Reduce burnout by properly staffing decisions that managers make. Those are direct solutions to direct problems. Those are management problems. They don't require converting market volatility into a public liability. Stability is not achieved by making a larger promise. Stability is achieved by aligning incentives, fixing operational friction, and managing risk honestly. We know markets will turn. Revenue will fluctuate. Assumptions will be revised. History has proven that. People will live longer. Under a defined benefit system, those realities become public funding problems that future generations have to deal with. Under our defined contribution system, they do not. That's not ideology. It's not from my conservative bias. It's structure. And this structure for our state government matters. And I hope that our legislature is listening. And I certainly hope that the governor is listening. When that bill gets to his desk, he vetoes it. And we've got members of our legislature that will sustain his veto. We do not need a defined benefit system to address pay problems and classification problems and recruiting and retention problems. We need better management in our state government. That's what we need. So you've got articles out there. You've got some committee meetings if you want to go bore yourself with committee meetings. We don't need to return to a defined benefit system. All right, folks. I'm off my soapbox for this evening. I'm going to check what your messages are here and try to catch up with what you've been chatting here as I've been speaking. So tell us what's worse for our state today. Look, I think that defined benefits is not what's worse for our state today. It's not. It's what's worse for our state, for our kids and our grandkids, because they're the ones that will have to pay the price. They'll have to figure out what to do when our assumptions didn't work. They're the ones. Good evening, Kevin. Good evening, Lisa. Hello from Big Lake. Thanks for joining us. Christopher, pensions are gone from private business. Defined benefits need to do the same. Yeah, used to be that your big corporations had defined benefit pensions. Most of them are gone. I know that there are a few pensions out there in the private sector still, but most of them are gone. Especially for large corporations, they cannot afford it. And again, this is the point is, it's not that the company or the government can't afford it today. It's that you can't afford it in the future. because it requires you to make assumptions and then have discipline to manage that as those assumptions come true or don't come true. And that's the problem. You don't always have availability to the same thinkers that created the plan in the future. You've got new people making new decisions and new scenarios and new economic situations. People need to be responsible for their funds and stop relying on government to do everything for them. Yeah, I mean, and this is what a defined contribution system does. You're able to manage your own retirement. You don't end up working for the government for 20 years. Well, then you've got a retirement system that supports you when you move. Chris, yeah, you're right. The state can't afford this. And it's not that they can't afford it now. It's they can't afford it in the future. The Senate Finance Committee heard briefing from DRB, or the retirement board, that said, with our current assumptions and the current way we're managing it, we'll have everything paid off by 2039. Okay, great. Now we all feel great, right? But between now and 2039, you know what happens? Life happens. Like, we don't know for sure that that's going to happen. That's just what we're projecting. So we got to keep doing exactly what we're doing and keep investing. And the stock market's got to do exactly what it needs to do, like what it's been doing, in order for us to get there. We don't know that for sure. And I think this is key there, Lynn. Recruiting and retention is a leadership and management structure problem, more so than it is a defined benefits or retirement system problem. 100%. I believe that to be the case. Teacher issue is not just a Alaska issue. It's all across the U.S. People don't want to teach anymore. They want a job to work and then change when they get bored. You know, I think that as the school system nationally has gotten more woke, teachers who don't agree with the woke agenda have left. And this isn't something that's just, within the last year. This has been something that's been building. A little bit of resentment maybe within teachers that are like, you know what, I'm tired. Maybe resentment's not it, but frustration with administration and the policies, unfunded mandates that are coming down. We got more unfunded mandates in the legislature this year. What is it? One of the senators has got a bill that says we need to make sure we teach our kids CPR. They all need to know CPR. Like, really? This is what teachers need to worry about? We need to make sure that gets, it's just the mothering of our society. I'm like we need some personal responsibility here. Yes, elections have consequences. Yeah. I hope the SAVE Act passes. I'm hearing speculation that it's never going to get out of the Senate. I tell you what, we're focusing and this is not on my topic, but this evening, the SAVE Act's focusing on elections, but really what's at stake here is reapportionment. What happens every 10 years with a census? The whole concept of being able to vote and be in this country illegally and be counted as a citizen, as a resident, I should say, during apportionment, which determines how many representatives go to the House of Representatives in Congress. That's what's at stake here, because the Constitution just counts people. It just says count whoever's here. It doesn't say, if they're legal, only count them. Don't count the illegal ones. It doesn't matter. So this whole point, this whole move to reduce the illegal immigrant population the whole point here to require identification so that you make it harder for illegals to vote and to just be here anyway. It has to do with apportionment. You've seen a major influx of immigrant populations in urban centers tied and then supported by federal money flowing into urban centers, right? And urban centers are all left-leaning voting machines. That's what this is about. It's not about the voting. It's about apportionment. It's what this is supporting. Yeah, that's exactly right. It's about redistricting. And if we don't act now, if Congress doesn't act now, and we lose one or both houses at the midterm elections, we're not going to be able to manage this going forward with Trump. You got a short window of opportunity here to right the ship. Republicans on the Hill had better get in line and understand what's at stake here. Here I am talking about Republicans getting in line. Oh my gosh. Well, I think that's it for tonight. Appreciate y'all joining me. And look, if you want, I'm open to suggestions as well. If there are other things you want to hear about, drop me a line. You can text me here on social media, or you can email me. I'll throw my email address up here so I can get your email and we'll talk about what you want to talk about. Anyway, call your legislator, especially your senator. Let them know you don't want to see the defined benefits bill pass. And it has to go back to the House. Well, I assume that it's going to have to go back to the House because the Senate modified the House's version. So it has to go back for a concurrence vote in the House. And it's not an insignificant change that the Senate made to HB 78. The Senator Bjorkman's committee, Senate Labor and Commerce, changed the bill from a optional defined benefits plan, optional for new employees, to that new employees don't have a choice anymore. They just get put in, automatically enrolled in a defined benefits. So even if they wanted to have a defined contributions plan like all the current employees do, they would not be allowed to. So that was in the House version of the bill, but it was stripped out and changed in the Senate Labor and Commerce Committee. So we'll see what happens in the House, whether they want to maintain choice or whether they want to slap those golden handcuffs on new employees, regardless of what they want. So contact your senator, contact your representative, let them know what you think about this defined benefits HB 78, and ultimately let the governor know whether you want him to sign it or veto it. We can't afford, our children cannot afford this mistake. Anyway, all right, I'm signing off for tonight. Thanks for joining me. See you tomorrow night. Have a good night.